Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Jane here. Welcome to Jane by Design. Today we are going to learn how to make this asymmetric hemline top. It's something I would like to have in my closet. If you're interested in knowing how to draft this pattern, watch the video to the end. On this channel I upload pattern drafting and sewing tutorials. Please kindly subscribe. Please subscribe to the channel, watch the video to the end, and leave a comment in the comment section. So to begin, I have this fabric, white fabric. I'm going to also attach the blue to it later on, but I'm going to set this aside and we're going to be working on the pattern. So for the pattern, I have my pattern paper on the work table. I have my rulers, I have my scissors, and I have my marker. So the measurements you'll be needing for this is your bust circumference, your shoulder measurement, your waist circumference, and your hip circumference. These are the measurements you're going to be needing for this pattern. So if you're a beginner, you have not seen the video on how I draft the basic bodice pattern, it's on the channel. You can go check out the channel and watch the video to the end. So the first thing we're going to start doing is to place a mark at the top of the paper, and this is going to serve as our shoulder line. So from the shoulder, you're going to be taking your bust line, your waistline, and your hip line. I'm going to mark this across the paper to ensure that I have accuracy. So after you've marked out these points on your paper, you're going to now use your ruler to connect them together. You're going to use your ruler to connect these 3 points together, your bust line, your waistline, and your hip line as well. Okay, so after we've done that, we've connected these 3 points together, we're going to also indicate the extension. So on the picture, you can see that the asymmetric gown, the asymmetric top has an extension in front, and for the extension I'm going to be using 5 inches. So from my hip line, I placed my tape there and I measured 7 inches for the extension, and then I went ahead to mark it across. Now to begin, go back to your shoulder line, and then you're taking your shoulder divided by 2, that's your shoulder measurement divided by 2, and then you mark that on your chest line as well. You come down by 1 inch from the shoulder line for the shoulder drop. Then you're going to be marking your shoulder distance for your armhole, and then you're going to be connecting the chest line outwards. So when you've gotten distance for your armhole, you're going to square it up to touch the shoulder slope. And after that, we are going to now take the neck width. So for the neck width, I'm going to be taking 3.5 inch, and from there I'm going to connect to my shoulder slope. All right, now going back to the armhole line, I'm going to get the midpoint of my armhole. At the midpoint, you're going to come in by 1/2 inch, and then come down to your chest line. You take 1/4 of your chest bust circumference, and then you place it on your chest line. Then you now use your armhole ruler to connect these 3 points together. That way we've created the armhole for the front. Okay, now going back to the neckline, we're going to take the neck depth. So for the neck depth, I'm going to be using 3 inches for my neck depth. I'm going to now use my ruler to mark it out. After this, now we're going to take your waist circumference, my waist circumference divided by 4. I'm going to place that there, and then coming down to the hip, your hip circumference divided by 4, you also place the mark there. And back to the waist, you're going to take the bust span divided by 2. You're going to place the mark on the waist, the bust line, and the hip line. Then you're going to be connecting it with a straight line. This is for where the dart is going to be sitting on. So for the dart, we are going to be using 1/2 inch on both sides. That's 1 inch dart, and we're going to be extending it upward to touch the bust line. But before then, we're going to come down by 1 inch from the bust line, and from the hip line, you're going to go up by 2 inches. After that is done, you're going to use your ruler to connect these points. You know the shape of a dart, so we're going to be marking out the shape of a dart on our paper. All right, so after that is done, after you've taken the dart on your paper, the next thing to do is to connect your side seam. So for the side seam, since we've taken our body circumference already, all you need to do is to take your ruler, and then you're going to be connecting from from your chest line down to your waist, and from your waist down to your hip. So for the extension we have at the lower part, we're going to take our hip measurement divided by 4, and then we're going to place the mark there. From there, you're going to now use your ruler to connect from your hip down to the extension. Just watch carefully and see the way I'm doing it. For beginners, it's very important. So now I've connected them now. So whatever we do for the right side is what we're going to do for the left. So just ensure that you transfer all of your markings from the left to the right. So I'm just basically doing the same thing for the other side. I'm marking out my 7-inch extension, then I'm squaring it out, and then I'm going to use my ruler to square it out. Okay, after squaring it out, I mean, ensure that you have your quarter of your hip on the same line, and then you're going to connect it to your hip line. So basically, whatever you do for the right side, you do for the left side. The reason why we are drafting this pattern on fold and we're not cutting out the paper, we're not cutting the paper in the middle, is because it's an asymmetric hemline and you need the complete bodies for it. So here, I'm going to be connecting the extension upward now to touch the hip line. After that is done, this is what it looks like. This is what your pattern should look like if you've gotten up to this point, okay? Now you can see I've also transferred my darts to the right side as well. Now onto the left, you need to know where you want your design to start from. So for this, I'm going to start from the left. I'm going to go up from the left armhole by 3 inches, depending on wherever you want yours to be. I'm going to go up by 3 inches from the left, and from the left I'm going to connect a curvy line to touch the waist line, of the right. So just pay attention. I don't know if you are going to understand how I'm going to explain it, but if you watched and paid attention to how I am curving out the lines to touch the waist, you would see that it's quite easy and simple. So while you are curving out your lines, if it's not as straight as you want it to be, if it's not curvy as much as you want it to be, you can go ahead and redraw your lines and make it more curvier than you would want, or more curvier than what I have already on my pattern. So right here, I'm just ensuring that my lines comes out accurately and how I want it to come out. I'm just using my pencil to redraw it again to touch the armhole. So from the left side of my paper, I went ahead to draw. I went up by 3 inches from the armhole upward. Then I now drew out a line to touch the waistline at the right side. That is what we've just done. So now for the lower part, you're going to come down from your waist. Now before that, I'm just going to label out my parts. I'm going to label out the waistline. I'm going to label out the hip line as well, so we can now continue. Now for the second part of this design, we are going to come down by 4 inches on the waistline. So still from the left side, you're going to place your tape on your waistline and you're going to mark out 4 inches. Okay, so wherever 4 inches is on your tape, you place a mark there from your waistline down 4 inches. Then you come to the extension by the right, you go in by 5 inches. All right, so you go in by 5 inches on the right, and then you're going to be connecting from that waistline down to the extension you have. So I'm just using my ruler. Okay, I'm using my ruler to connect again. So you can use freehand, like I said, you can use freehand to do this, but sometimes I use my ruler, sometimes I can use freehand. So depending on what works for you. So I'm using my ruler now to connect these 2 points that I've just marked, and then I'm going to make sure that the curve comes out well. Now from that point, now we are going to now mark out a triangle shape to touch the hip line towards the right again. So just watch carefully. If you're not understanding what I'm saying, if you're watching this video carefully, you would understand. So I've connected it to touch the hip line to form a triangular shape at that lower end. So you can see the shape for this, the design for the front came out beautifully. I love how it looks like. All right, so next thing that I will do after I've gotten this design is to cut out the pattern. Okay, so we're going to be cutting the front first. We're going to be cutting the top first before we work on the dart. So here we are going to go ahead now and label the parts, right? So label the parts, the bust line, the waist and the hip. Then I'm going to start by cutting the top first, and then I'm going to set it aside. So just go ahead and cut out the top of your pattern for the front panel, and then you're going to set it aside. I'm going to be cutting the armhole. I'll cut the shoulder line, I'll cut the neckline out, and just all the sides of the front. Now please note that this pattern does not have a stitching allowance to it. It doesn't have a sewing allowance to it. So when I transfer this onto my fabric, then I'm going to be adding a sewing allowance then. But for now that I'm cutting it out, there is no sewing allowance to it. Okay, so just so that we are clear for beginners. Now after cutting out this top part, I'm going to set it aside. Then we are going to work on the second part of the front. So for the second part of the front, this is what it looks like. Now I'm going to be extending my dart legs upwards and downwards, and the reason is because I want these parts to be in three. I want to cut out the dart. If you don't want to cut out your own dart, you can just leave it like this and then stitch it up on your fabric. But I don't want a dart line on it. I just want it to have a straight line. So I'm going to be cutting out the dart. I'm going to be extending the dart at the hemline and also at the top. Then I will be cutting it out. So just watch it, see how I'm extending the dart legs upward. So now we are done extending, and the next thing to do is to cut out this pattern. So we are going to be cutting out, I'm going to be starting from the low part, and we are going to be cutting the sides, all the sides. We're going to be cutting that out. Okay, we are also going to be cutting the darts as well. So that is the reason why I extended the dart legs up and down, because I want the front panel to be into three. That is why I'm cutting off the darts. If you don't want yours to be in three, you can just go ahead, leave your pattern like this, and then stitch up the darts when you are stitching your fabric. But I just wanted to take off that dart, and I wanted it to have just two lines running at that edge. So that is why I am cutting off the dart. So you can see I have cut out the first dart. I'm going to also cut out the second dart, and then I'm going to trim out the lower part, and that will be it for the front. You can see how easy and simple. It's very, very easy and simple. If you watched this video up to this point, please subscribe to the channel, give me a like, ensure to like this video, please, and also share these videos with your friends. Thank you very much. So I'm going to be cutting out the lower part as well, and after we are done cutting, ladies and gentlemen, this is what your panel should look like when you're done cutting. This is what the front should look like when you're done cutting. So this is what it looks like after we are done cutting. You can see I've placed them side by side. So what I will do next now is to just label all of the parts, so we keep it aside, and then we are going to go back and work on the top, the upper part of this top. If you look at the picture, you see that the upper part has some little bit of gathering at the top. So what I will do for that is to do a slash and spread for it. So right here, what I'm doing is to take my pattern master, and I'm just drawing lines on the top, just so that we can have that gathering effect, that ruchy effect that is happening at the top of this top, at the front of this top. So here I am drawing out slash lines that I'm going to later on slash. And then after drawing out these lines, I didn't really measure it out. For those of you that is going to ask me how many inch apart, I didn't really measure that. I just went ahead to mark out lines on my paper on the front. So after marking out these lines, I'm going to go ahead now and start slashing it open. You can see the way I'm doing it in the video. I'm slashing it open, And as I'm slashing it open, I'm not slashing all the way to the end of the paper, just so that you know. Be very careful when you are slashing and opening up. So I'm going on to just slash open all the lines that I have drawn on the front of this top. So after we've done slashing, this is what it's going to look like. And then I'm going to now get another paper. I'm going to place this on another paper, and then I'm going to spread it open. So here I have spread this on a sheet, a pattern paper, and I spread by 1.5 inch. Okay, I spread by 1.5 inch, and I use my tape to hold it down. You can see it in the video. So what I'm doing right now is adding sewing allowances all around it. By the side, I'm adding 1 inch sewing allowance to it. Okay, by the armhole, you can see by the armhole there, I added 0.5 inch to it. Also for the lower parts, I will be adding 0.5 inch as well to that part. Now for the part where we have our slashed lines open and spread, what I did on that part was to hold it down and then use my tracing wheel to trace it out. Okay, so just see what I'm doing right now. I'm folding it in the part where I've slashed open and spread. I'm folding it in and I'm using my tracing wheel to trace out that side. And the reason why I'm doing this, so that it will be easier for me to add this stitching allowance that I need, and it will also be easier for me to pleat it in at the armhole when I cut it on my fabric. So that way the folding, I'm going to represent it on my fabric, and then I'll place a notch at those points. So the tracing wheel is to ensure that the lines appear, and after tracing out, I'm going to use my pencil to highlight the parts that I have traced out. So that's the reason why I'm using a tracing wheel. So you can see the lines that I have traced out with my tracing wheel. I'm using my pencil now to go over them again, just so that they are much more visible and they are sitting exactly how they are supposed to sit. So that's the essence of the tracing wheel. All right, so now after we've traced out that corner and we've highlighted it also with our pencil and marker, the next thing is to add your sewing allowance to it. So by that side, I added 0.5 inch stitching allowance to it after I have traced out the lines from my tracing wheel. And then going to the neckline, I've added 0.5 inch also to my neckline, 0.5 inch stitching allowance to my neckline. At the shoulder line, I added 0.5 inch as well. On my slashed and spread side, I went ahead to add 0.5 inch on it as well. You can see the way that I am following the pattern that I have created at the side. It's very easy. It's going to be easy to blend in when we split this into our pattern, into our fabric, sorry. So after I am done with this, I'm going to cut out. So after cutting out, this is what it looks like. This is what we are going to be placing on our fabric, and this is what we are going to be cutting out exactly on our fabric. So now the front panel is done. You can see how beautiful this pattern is looking. I can't wait to recreate this on the fabric. I'm going to bring the remaining parts of the front so you see what it looks like. This is what the front panel looks like, and remember that the only part I added stitching allowance at the moment is the top. For the lower side, when I place it on my fabric, I'll be adding the stitching allowance then. Now moving on to the back. For the back, you're going to be drafting your basic back pattern from the shoulder to the hip line, and you're going to be cutting on fold on my fabric, on my pattern, sorry. You can see that I added my zipper allowance as well. I added 1 inch zipper allowance to it. And for the back, you need to know what parts you're going to be labeling as your left and your right. For the front, I use the right to cut out the design. So for the back, I'm going to be using the left side. So what I'm doing here is to just label out all of my markings on my paper. So we can now proceed from there. Now for the extension, like we did for the front, I'm going to come down by 7 inches as well. Then I'm going to mark it across. So for the left and for the right side of this pattern, you're going to mark your 7 inches all across it. Then you're going to use your pattern master to square out the line. Now you can decide to give the back a different shape from what I have. I went ahead to do that later on when I'm cutting. So in my sewing and cutting video, you're going to see a different back design for the back. But for now, we are going to just recreate what we have at the front and recreate it at the back. So here I've connected the points together, and now we're going to go on to the design. So for this design, we're going to be using the left side of the back panel. So for the left side, you just go up by 3 inches like we did for the front, and then you're going to mark out your design to touch the waistline of the back. So for the waistline of the right side of the back, okay? So just mark out your design 3 inches upward on your armhole line, and then you connect it to touch the waistline of the right side of the back. Just watch the video. If you're a beginner, just watch and pay attention. You will get it. It's not that difficult. It's not that hard, I promise. So you just get your curve to touch the waistline, and that is it. I'm just going to use my marker to smoothen out the parts. Now you come down to your waist also by the left side of the pattern, okay? You come down from your waist by 4 inches. All right, 4 inches, you go on to mark 4 inches right there. And then onto the right side of this pattern, at the extension we have, you come in by 5 inch. When you come in by 5 inch, you're going to connect it with a straight line. You're going to form 45 degrees to touch your hip line. All right, just connect it to touch the hip line. And then from there, you're going to mark out your style line to touch that point you have on the extension. So I'm just going ahead to ensure that the style line that I'm going to be drawing, the design I'm going to be drawing, the line comes out smoothly. So I'm just using my marker and my pencil to ensure that my lines come out nice. So from that 4 inch you came down from your waist, you're going to just go ahead and extend and connect to the extension you have at the lower part of your blouse. And so that is it, guys. The next thing I'm going to do is to take 1/2 inch at the waistline so we can take off any form of zipper bulge at that side. So on the zipper line at the waistline, you're going to take away 1/2 inch, and we're going to just mark that towards the chest line and towards the hip line. That way we are going to be cutting that out. That's 1/2 inch. We are going to be cutting it out so that when you place this on your fabric, or when you end up making this you don't have your back bulging out. So here we're almost done. I'm going to go ahead and cut out. All right, we've cut out. I'm going to start cutting out. I'm going to cut out the armhole now. Please note that this pattern does not have a sewing allowance to it. I'm going to be adding the sewing allowance when I transfer this pattern onto my fabric. So here I've cut out the 1/2 inch zipper bulge at the back. So we can now go ahead and start cutting out the remaining parts. So for the darts, I'm not going to be cutting out the darts the way I cut out the darts for the front. So we're not going to be doing that for the back. We're going to just stitch up the two sides for the back, and then we're going to stitch the dart on it, and that's it for the back. We're not going to be slashing it into pieces like we did for the front. You don't need all of that for the back. So I'm just cutting off, and here after cutting out, we are going to cut out our style line. The reason why we are cutting the style line is because we are going to be mixing two fabric. That is why. If we're not mixing two fabric, then there's no point for the design. So the design is because we're going to be mixing two fabrics. We're going to be using a white and a blue. That is why we are cutting it out. So here after cutting, this is what it looked like. I totally enjoyed this pattern drafting. I hope you did. If you watched up to this point, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment in the comment section. Thank you guys for watching my videos. Thank you for sticking on the channel. I love you guys so much. I will see you guys in my next one, which is going to be the sewing tutorial. Stay blessed, and yeah, see you guys. Bye.